Wow. All right. Good morning. With the help of Hashem, we are learning today's three prakim: Rambam, Hilchos, Trumois, prakim Zayin, Ches, and Tes, beginning with Perek Zayin. Perek Zayin is going to be speaking about a kohen who's tamei, exactly what needs to happen for him to be, so to say, removed from the status of Tumah, which will allow him to eat the Truma. We're going to learn about the concept of Herev, Shemesh. We're going to learn the huge difference between a kohen who became tamei because the Tumah was Yotzei Megufai. He became tamei because something left his body, as we'll see, Zav, Zava, even a Balkeri, versus someone who's tamei from an outside source, in which there's going to be a much easier process to go out of that status of Tumah, to eat Truma. We're going to learn many cases where that which halachically belongs to the kohen will be allowed to eat Truma, and that's called ma'achilin. In other words, the kohen has the right to share the kohen has the power through him acquiring something for that thing to be allowed to eat Truma. And as we're going to finish learning about the cases of ma'achilin, we'll be set up for the topic of the next chapter, was going to be sometimes where there is a connection that is only to the detriment, which is called poislin v'loy ma'achilin. In our chapter, it's going to be some cases where, because of one being the kinyan of the kohen, one will be allowed to eat Truma. Perek Zayin has 23 halachas, beginning with halacha aleph. It says that Rambam kohen tamei asur lechol betruma. If he is tamei, he may not eat Truma. Whether the Truma is tamei, but one might think, if the Truma is tamei and he's tamei, that's a good shidduch. But we don't say that. Whether the Truma is tahira, the isur is based on the pasuk in Emor Shenemar ish mizera aharoin for hu tzurua, which makes him a tamei, or he's a zav, which makes him tamei. Ba kachim lo yoichal, he may not eat kachim. And true, normally the word kachim is not referring to Truma. Normally the word kachim is referring to kachim, sacrificial food. However, not in this pasuk. There are times that the words kachim is referring to Truma, because Eizahu kodesh oichlon oisik kol zera aharoin ish mizera aharoin. That's only whether the gender is male or female. Hava oimer zet Truma. Unlike kachim, that there are the kachim, like kachim, that can only be eaten libnei aharon. Elo shekol tamei ha'eichel truma tohira. Here chayiv misebedei shamayim, and therefore he's going to get malchus. Shenemar, as it says, v'shamru es mishmarti v'lo yisu alav cheit. However, if a tamei kohen was tamei who eats truma, that's tamei, even though they're violating a lav, ain't a loika, because it's not kodesh. So they're both asur, different levels of isur, malchus versus no malchus. Halacha beis. Now, ein hatmeim oichlin betruma. You have to add the words, even after they went to the mikvah. Mikvah is not enough. Achiyaref shimshon, until the sun sets, meaning not until just shkia, but yaref shimshon v'yetzu shloisha kechavim achar shkias achama. For you to have a bona fide tzeisak yechavim, shenemar, as it says, bo hashemesh, that the sun will set and then he will become pure v'toher. So Chazal also learn how normally sunset means we call shkia, but not over here. Until the sky will become pure of any light. In other words, it has to be tzeis, and only then va'achar yoichel min hakachim. Now, many people are familiar with this rule. Simply, this is included in the first Mishnah in the whole Shas, right? From when can you read the Shema? We're going to have a big thing in this Perek, which adds a wrinkle or more, as we said in the intro. This is not always going to be the case. But let's just begin with the rule. Halacha gimel. So the opposite way around. His taught. The truma is tamei, that's also prohibited, but ain't like. Why not? Because this prohibition is derived from a asay, as it says va'achar yoichel min hakachim, which also means midavar shehu biktushasai hu sheyoichel kishayitar, which implies avol davar tamei lo yoichel, even though afal pi sheyitar, even though the kohen became purified. So true, we learn from the implication that the kohen may not eat it, but since it's coming from an asay, it only has the power of a positive commandment, which means that for this, there will not be the penalty of malchus. Now, halacha dalet. One of the ways for a man to become tamei is whenever he will have a seminal emission. Says the Rambam, if a man is eating truma, and while he's eating truma, he feels that his limbs shudder. He feels the bodily sensation that happens while he is admitting the seed. So the din is that when technically does a man become tamei, when the semen actually leaves his body. He's eating truma. When it leaves his body, he becomes a kohen. That's tamei. So what should he do? He should physically hold on to his member, not allowing for the zera to leave the body. And that will save, so to say, and a moment later, even though he just ate the truma, not a problem, he already ate it up, and he won't be in this violation. Halacha 5. Hashoita, or a chedesh, which is also considered halachically if one is born deaf and mute to be mentally underdeveloped. So they don't know how to make sure that they're going to remain tahor. So matbilan oisai, in other words, we observe them going to the mikvah with other pratim to make sure that there isn't a halachic chatzitza. Umachilin oisan truma achar sheherev shamshin, and we stay with them. We stay with them, as we'll see in a moment, and then we can give them truma after herev shemesh. Umeshamrin oisan shelo yishnu achar atfilah. We don't allow them to fall asleep. If they go to sleep, that's fine, but they can't eat truma. Why? Because she'im yishnu, once they fall asleep, they are tameim. Because when you have a developed person, there's always the possibility that while one is asleep, some semen will leave the body, but the adult who's developed will be aware of it. These are people that won't be aware of it. Elam Kain, also Lam Kishon Lachoshes, if a person makes some sort of copper container that the person wears on his private parts, and there, unlike a material where semen can be completely absorbed and no one will notice it, there you'll see if it's there or not to determine whether truma can be given to that person or not. Halacha vav, roichvei gemalim, camel riders. We're speaking about camel riders that don't use a saddle. Asurim lechel betruma, they are not allowed to eat truma until they go to the mikvah, and they wait until head of shemesh, which, as we said, doesn't only mean shkia, means shkia and says. Why? Because they are automatically becheskas tuma, mipnei chimum harachiva al oir hagamol, because of the physical stimulation that's produced by riding on the flesh of the camel. We're speaking about someone who's not using the saddle. That will cause the body to emit a drop of semen that will make the person tamei. So therefore, they have to always, a kohen will have to go to the mikvah and wait until night. Halacha 7. Hameshameshes mitasa. Now let's go into a woman. As we learned, right, even if it's a bas Yisrael, while she's married to a kohen, she gets to eat truma. Now, if there is a marital relation, so it's important to know two details. Number one, when a couple is together, the woman becomes tamei like a man who becomes tamei when there's a seminal emission, simply because they were together. Now, for that, it would suffice, like for the husband, right? Go to the mikvah and wait until it gets dark. But here's another issue. That when there is semen zera of a man inside a woman, if that zera is going to leave her body, it will then make her tamei. When it's inside her body, even though the semen itself is a source of tumah, but that's called tumah balua. When something is inside the body, it doesn't impart tumah. Now, another thing, obviously, sometimes the woman can be aware that some zera left her body, zera of a man, but sometimes it can leave in such a minute amount that she won't even be aware of it. Another detail, even if physically something left her body, it only has the halachic status of semen for 70 to 72 hours, which is 3 days from when they had a relation. Because the Torah determines that it is only within that amount of time that the sperm can remain alive inside the woman's body. Now, final detail, L'shita Rambam, that halachically, when could we say, no, it didn't leave her body? If some zera left her body, she'll be aware of it. But we don't say that for sure some of the zera left her body. When on other times do we say for sure the zera will leave her body slowly? It has to do with whether, the words of the Rambam is, whether she turned over during the relations. These are the words. It was if, so let's read it inside now. Hamashamish mitasa. No, that in itself makes her tummy, as it does him. But that can be resolved by going to the mikveh and waiting until the night. For the woman, that's not enough, because if zera of the man will then leave her body, it's going to again be metama her. So if she did not turn over during the act of intimacy, the Rambam holds, then halachically we can presume that the man's zera will not leave her body, at least not with her awareness, at least not without her awareness. If it's going to leave, she'll know about it, which is fine. So then she'll know that she can't eat truma. If she's not aware of it, then we're going to presume it's staying in her body. And therefore, like the man, it's enough for her to go to the mikveh, and she can eat truma once it's says like yechavim. But for him, this hapcha b'shas tashmish. So then, she may not eat truma for the next 3 days because she after this for sure going to be some of the zera will be leaving her body. She won't even be aware of it, but that's going to happen. Halachically, it's considered zera within 72 hours, as we will learn in its proper place, which is the Hilchas Avis Hatumas Perikei. And by the way, the reason why nowadays, when everyone keeps Taras HaMishpacha, why after a woman becomes a nida, even if her veses is very short, or even if she became a nida only because of a keser, so there won't be any more blood leaving her body. She has to wait by Ashkenazim at least 5 days prior to making a hefsek tara is because of the same concept. Because if she makes a hefsek tara and zera leaves her body, unlike dam, which will be soiser all of the 7 clean days, it won't do it that much. But the day in which zera left her body, that day cannot be counted as one of the shivas nikiyim. So you have to really wait for the 3 days to pass, and the 3 days became l'chumra, became 4 days. By us, it became 5 days. Halacha 8. Trumas chutz la'aretz. Hoyel v'ikara midivreim, as we learned in the beginning. Midoy raisa, trumas only from that which grows in the Holy Land. Eina asura b'achila elo l'koyin, shetuma yoytza olav migufay. This is a huge. It's when a koyin became tamei, because Tuma left his body, which is like we just mentioned, the man who has a seminal emission or this unhealthy seminal emission that makes him into a Zav. Or when it comes to a woman, we're speaking about the Tuma of a Zava, which is when she has her period in an unusual time, or when she has her regular period, or after she gives birth. In other words, something happened in their bodies that caused them to become Tameh. So then she may not eat it. She may not eat even truma midrabanan because she's tamei. But listen to this. But the kulam in all of these cases, mutarim la'achla afal pi shaloi had of shimshon. If the truma is only midrabanan, all you need to do is go to the mikveh, and you don't have to wait until head of shemesh. Avol tamei magas tumais. But if a person becomes tamei because they touch something else that imparted tuma to them, even if they touched a corpse. So it's the highest level of tuma. Not only is tumas meis the highest level of tuma, but the Rambam is acknowledging a fact that we don't yet have the ashes of the red heifer. So it's a tuma from which you cannot become purified. Which for that going to the mikvah would suffice. You don't even have to go to the mikvah. The trumas chutz la'aretz. So basically, there are two. This is wow. Right, when we learned Mishnayos and Cheder, we were not taught this detail. You have a rule, a kohen nastame has to go to the mikveh and wait until night. Now you're learning 2 dinim. If it's trumas chutz la'aretz, number 1, if it's not tuma that was yoitzes migufa, you b'chlal don't have to go to the mikveh. Wow, mal gavaldik. And even if it's a tuma yoitzes migufa, you don't need to have erev shemesh. Halacha tes. Lefikach, and therefore, kohen cotton. Shadayin loira keri, or a katana shadayin loira nida, which means even if they're tummy, it's not a tuma yotzes migufan. Oichlin oisay, they can eat truma midrabanan without even checking themselves, because since they never had a seminal emission, he's very young. Shechaskasin shaliyatzu tuma dayin aleim. However, a matzoira, it's not that something left his body, but the cause is something in the body, about his or her body. Another detail, even by then, by a matzoira, it's only if he was declared tamei by a kohen miyuchas. Aval koydim sheitamen or kohen, he remains tahor. Halacha Yud. Kohen Adol also lechel betruma midin Torah. If he's uncircumcised, because it says Toishav v'sachir betruma. The Torah says that Toishav, Kohen v'sachir lo yoichal kodesh. That's also that's lo yoichal kodesh also means truma. It says regarding the Korban Pesach also Toishav v'sachir lo yoichal boy. Oh, so says Chazal quotes the Rambam ma Toishav v'sachir omer b'Pesach. Adol asur boim af, and I'll tell you more. Even if this is a person who did not have a circumcision because halacha did not allow him to have a circumcision, l'mashal shemesu achiv machmas milam af Toishav v'sachir omer b'trumam adol asur boim and v'im achal loikem in ataydo. So here we already have two kohen tamei cannot eat truma, kohen adol cannot eat truma. Now another detail: if a person had a bris milah, but they had a technique, we're not even certain how they did it or what that means, in which they bring their foreskin back to the way it used to be. That's called hamoishech or mashuch. Since he was circumcised by the letter of the law, muter lechel betruma, even though he looks like an uncircumcised person. However, rabbinically, with divrei seifrim, she'imol pam shniyah, they have to cut off more of that foreskin. Ad sheyeira mohu. Halacha Yudalev hanoilad mohu. Someone is born circumcised, which is extremely rare. I know that here in LA a couple of years ago, the moil said, noilad mohu. Not exactly, not really. It's something extremely rare to be born completely circumcised, but such a person is oichel betruma. A tumtum cannot eat truma. Why? Because maybe he's a male. Certainly there was no circumcision because that entire area is covered over with an issue of safekadol. However, a androgynous, even though we don't know whether it's male or female, but since the male organ, the male part of the androgynous is exposed, so make a bris milah to that, and then the androgynous can eat them. Don't forget that as we began the series, unlike kachim that may only be eaten lezichre kahuna, truma can be eaten by all zera aharon bein zecharim bein lekepes. Halacha yud beis ha'aral v'chalat meim afal pishem asurim alecha b'truma. Listen to this. Now we're going to begin with explaining the concept of ma'achilin. Ma'achilin means that since you are allowed to eat truma, people that are connected to you in a way that the Torah will deem that connection as a kinyan. Not the way the world understands the word kinyan. Marriage is also called a kinyan. But if the Torah calls it kinyan kaspai, then the kohen will be ma'achil, will allow that other person to eat. So let's go. So the gavaldik. So an adol is not allowed to eat. A tamei cannot eat. But the wife of the adol, the wife of the tamei, if she's not tameya, she is allowed to eat. Similarly, nishayim, avdeyim, their slaves, are allowed to eat. Because the issue with the adol and with the tamei is not an essential issue. That doesn't stop. No, it's not, when he can eat, she can eat. It doesn't go that way. It's if he be'etzem is allowed to eat, he's machal that which belongs to him. Halacha Yud Gimel. Now, psuadaka, uchru shavcha, which is a certain type of, as we learned not that long ago, a blemish on the male genitalia, which really does not allow him to marry into Kahal Hashem. And we're going to see that there's a huge difference whether this happened prior to his marriage or whether this happened after he's already married. So let's begin. So Heim va'avdeyem, they and their avodim are allowed to eat. Or neshayem lo yoichlu. Why? Because since he was not allowed to get married, that marriage renders her into a zoina, therefore it renders her into a halala. As we learned in Chassidus Bia, so a halala cannot eat truma. However, if he married her prior to him having this type of wound, and once he got this wound, he never had a relation with his wife, so he did not render her into a halala. So here again, guys, can eat. He's not Tommy, he's not an auto. The only question is whether he can be ma'achol his wife. Well, if she becomes a halala, no. If she doesn't become a halala, we're speaking about a ptsua daka. A ptsua daka is allowed to marry a bas gedim. It's a gavaldik thing. Since the marriage is permitted, it's normally a kohen cannot marry not a getter, not a bas gedim. Here, the marriage is kosher. That means she's not a halala. Just like a p'tzua daka himself can eat. In other words, as long as the marriage did not render her into a halala, then she's also oicheles. How great is that? Halacha yudal. P'tzua daka koyin, shekidesh bas koyin. So what happens over here? Here we're adding another nuance. Now we're going to introduce the concept of poislan. Poislan means that there are people that were already allowed to eat by themselves. A bas koyin. Some marriages poislan is the opposite of machilin, will disallow her to eat. So what we learned yesterday is that midin Torah guys, when a kohen gives kedushin to a bas Yisrael or a bas Leviah, the din of ma'achilin begins from engagement. Midoiraisa. It's only midrabanan that since she's still living in her father's home, and if he's going to give her truma, she might share the truma with her family members. So midrabanan, she has to wait until she gets married. That's important. But midoiraisa, the connection of kiddushin will allow. And now let's go in the reverse. A p'tzua daka koyin, shekidush bash koyin, even though there was no relation. But here, unlike in halacha yud gimel, that he was healthy when he got married. So the only issue is whether they had a relation after he got that type of wound. Here, he's a p'tzua daka prior to kiddushin. If he gives kiddushin even to a bas koyin, that's called poislan. How great is that? Sris chama, and that's a huge difference whether a person is born impotent, as we learned in Isuri Bia. That's called a sris chama. Whether chama means because of fever, just means that he was born that way. Hu ve'ishtoi ve'avadav oichlin. Just to know, remember, a sris chama is mutar lavei b'kal Hashem. And a sris adam is someone who was made impotent by an action of a man. He's asur lavei b'kal Hashem. And that's the whole word. Once it's asur lavei b'kal Hashem, that marriage renders her into a halala, and therefore she can't eat. That's the over here. Androgenes and atumtum, avdeyem oichlin, but their wives cannot eat. Why not? Very simple. Because atumtum might be in a keva. And androgenes halachically might be in a keva. There isn't halachic kiddushin between two women. So if the wife if the wife is not a kohenes bas kohen, no, she can only eat because she married someone who's ma'achal her. Well, that only happens if there's marriage. You have a doubt by your tumtum. Suffolk marriage cannot be ma'achal. Halacha tezvav. Chere shoyte v'katan. Shekana lem avodim. Even though there are times that midrabanan, if you remember that whole sugi of tikkun ha'olam, we do allow for these people to have a kinyan. Midoiraisa, their kinyan is not considered a kinyan. So just because the eved can only eat because it's kinyan kaspa. Well, it's not a kinyan. Or the adult apitropes, or if something came under possession via Yerusha, all of these are kinyanei de oiraisa. Yeah. So even though the kohen who's being machal is a minor, doesn't matter. It's king and kaspa of a kohen. Allah tazayin androgenes shenival lepoisel min hatruma. He's having a relation, a physical relation with a person who is disqualified to partake of truma. And now that relation itself could, and we'll see, render the androgenes prohibited to eat truma, whether that relation happened derech the male part, whether it happened derech the female part. In both cases, nifsal mila echol betruma kinashim. Number one, and number two, therefore, once he is pasul ve'ein avad avoichlin aval im nival li androgenes acher. But if this androgenes had a relation with another androgenes, and that other androgenes is pasul bibiyosoi li isham, then nifsal v'hu en erechav l'mechal avada v'hu. In this latter case, it's only sheyiva loisei derech lakvusay. Only if this guy, had a relation, derech his female organs, which will render him, now we're going to say that he's like the wife. So since the androgenes is someone with whom, whoever he has a relation with, he postles them, we're going to say the androgenes is an akeva. But if he had a relation, derech zachrusai, the mechanics, I have no idea, it's not again the concept. So what are you saying? So then it's a man and a man. A man and a man, that's a big cloud. Okay, Allah Yud Zay. Evet shel shutfin. Shohoya echad mehem einoi machol. It's very important.
Maybe he's in a kiva.
But if he had a derech zichrusai, if it wasn't a kiva, no. So then the relation is only us a derech nekvusai. I don't know the mechanics of it. If he had a derech zichrusai, then it's considered a bond of a man. The problem is there are certain men that if they have a relation with someone, Yaakov, they passel the other one to eat. That androgynous can only passel him if he's a man, maybe l'chumra. But if it had a derech his male organ, so then it was a man and a man. A man and a man doesn't pass. Okay, Allah Yudzai. Eved of Shutzim. Guys, these are the big kolalim. Again, this is going to help us appreciate Perek Ches as a buildup. We're learning about ma'achilin and poislin, right? Eved shall Shutzim. Shoya echad mehem eino machal. One of them cannot be Michael. The other one could. So what do you say? You know what you say? In other words, even though one of your masters would have been able, had you only belonged to him, would have given you the right to eat it, the part ownership of one that Einoi Machol ruins it. Doesn't go that way. Doesn't matter. Even that's the whole point. Even though they made up a deal. One day he works for one master, one day for the other master, but the halachic status is going to be considered always belonging to both. Now, all of these rules that we're learning in this chapter, right? Kinyan kaspoy of a kohen will allow that kinyan to eat truma. It's equal both for truma and for chaza and shoik. Chaza and shoik are parts of a korban shlamim. We're dafka mentioning chaza and shoik because when it comes to kachem, again, it's not given to the whole family. It's not given to women. It's not given to the avodim. It's given to the avodim that are doing the avoid. Halacha yudches. Bas Yisrael shenisas l'kohen. Let's go further. If you remember, not that long ago, we learned about two types of property that she can bring into the marriage. Nichzat soim barzel, that becomes bona fide property of the husband, and nichsa maloig, that remains hers. The husband has the right of user fruit. So let's now work this out. Abbas Yisrael, she marries a kohen. Ve'ichnisa abdei maloig, ve'ichnisa loy. Bein abdei maloig, bein abdei soim barzel, hadei elo yoichlo. Now, how does it work? I'll tell you how it works. Because then she is allowed to eat. During the marriage, she is allowed to eat, the wife.
So the Malay are eating really based on that.
So it doesn't matter if the Eved is his Eved or her Eved, they are both eating Truma. In other words, a Kenyan of your Kenyan can eat. And therefore, if there's a Metzias where one Eved acquires another Eved, same logic. The Eved of an Eved can also eat. Same logic. If you say that Nichsei Meloi can eat Truma, so an Eved of an Eved can eat Truma.
So that theoretically apply also to a Bas Kohen, not married.
Absolutely. We're going to have all this 100%. Chen avdei kohen shekonu avadim va'avdei ishtoi shekonu avadim. So you're going already 3 removed. But she's a Bas Yisrael. She's eating because she's married to the kohen. Her Eved is eating because it's her Eved. If her Eved buys an Eved, weiter yoichlu. Shenemar ki yikna nefesh kinyan kaspai. From here Chazal learn afilu kinyan hakinyan, and there's no limit to that. V'hakinyan oichel.
Is there an issue of like
and machol?
Huh? How do you know that all these avodim are keskes to Hira?
Then you came late. No, then we already. Of course, if they're tummy, they're tummy. That's the whole beginning. No big deal. A man knows if he has a seminal emission. We learned all the dinim. We also learned that no truma the rabbanan were very lenient. Let's go back. Now the kinyan ha'oichel machal, the kinyan she'ena ochel le'na machal achayden. So it's very simple. If you can eat, you can be Michael. If you cannot eat, you cannot be Michael. Halacha yutes. Bas kohen. Let's go in the opposite direction. She's a Bas kohen. She marries a Yisrael. Now she brings in bein avdim elok bein avdim tzim barzel. So in other words, the avodim cannot eat. Same reason. The Eved of Tzim Barzel belongs to who? Belongs to the husband. Husband cannot eat. The husband cannot be Michael. The Avdei Melug belong to her. Say there, so what? But she in the marriage cannot eat. So her avodim cannot eat. Who we paskin not like Rabbi Akiva. The marriage is effective, but it's also a gerusha and a chalutza that got married in the kohen hedyet. It's also the raisa, also the rabbanon, which bein kohenes, bein Yisraelis, In other words, even if she herself is a bas kohen, without marriage, she can eat. She doesn't need the kohen's husband to allow her to eat. Guys, now we can say it like this. That belong to her, even though the husband is chayev b'mezonosam, but it's not about who's chayev b'mezonos, it's who they belong to. And since the avdei meloig belongs to her, she becomes a halala, right? So she cannot eat, neither can her avadim. However, in this case, even though the husband is in violation, but the husband himself is not a halal, that's the irony. Children will become halal, but not him. The avdei tzem barzel yoichlu, because they belong to the husband. Another case: if a kohen marries a woman whose marriage is only asur midrabanan, as we began all of the sugya of aroyos that you have, the Rambam counts the 20 sheniyos. So we're speaking about a kohen who married a woman who may not be married midrabanan. So the din is he oicheles. Now here's a very difficult thing to understand. He oicheles I get, because why would she not be allowed to eat? She remember the words. She will not be allowed to eat is because whenever a woman is married to a kohen, she'll become a halala. Shniyas cannot make a halala because midoiraisa the marriage is okay. If she's not a halala, she's married to a kohen. Problem is, and this is a big topic. Like how does that work? She can eat. Her avadim should be allowed to eat. This is one area where it's not aligned. She can eat, and the avdit. Now, guys, avdit shein barzel can eat. That's for sure. Avdit shein barzel can eat even when there's a marriage that's also midoiraisa. Okay, that's the sugya here to explain, and there are many different approaches. Halacha chafal. Kohenes, she's a kohenes, and she is a almana, and she got engaged to a kohen gadol. Now, halkot, she would have been allowed to eat regardless. She's not married yet. Oi, you have a kohenes Danny. That's a gerusha, right? That gets engaged to a kohen hedyet. Hoyel behem mishamrois lebia psula shal toira harei elo lo yoichlo. That's the rule. These are the klalim in this chapter. It's going to help us understand next chapter better. Another din. Now, if such a woman, again, she is a bas kohen, she's a kohenes, but she enters the chuppah without erusin. Also, einoi oichlos, because shahachuppah, guys, we're speaking about a chuppah without kedushin. Shahachuppah poiseles oisam elachol. You know where you have a chuppah without kedushin? According to most poskim, nowadays. From when do they lose the right to eat? From when they enter the chuppah, even prior to the ring being given. As time goes on, more and more stuff happens before the kedushin. To me, under the chuppah, 30 minutes before the guy he gives a drasha, the rav. Nebach. Now, if they got separated, why is that, Danny? Because what renders a kohenes a halala is bia asura. Elama, there's this din, when you're meshamrois lebia psula, you lose your right to eat. Now, if the bia did not happen, that means she did not become not a zoina, not a halala, and the marriage fell apart, then yoichlu. Oh, a second. But if menana soim lo yoichlu shekvarnas chalalu. Halacha chav beis kohenes shemeis by or engagement. If she got engaged, yeah. Yes. Allah beis kohenes shemeis by lokoin chavalkop. You have to move. Kohenes shemeis by lokoin. And they're both. She's a kohenes. And now the nafla lifnei yevamim, and one of the yevamim is a chalom. So just like we said, a eved of two shutfim, if one of them cannot be machol, the eved cannot eat, even though the mitzvahs ba'ach hagadol, since there is a zika to all of the brothers, and one of them is a chalol, it's similar to what we just learned, that when you're meshamres l'bi psula, even though here she can do yibum with someone else. Which is the rabbinic pre-step, which means she will no longer be allowed to do yibum with the other siblings. Midrabanan, but midoraisa nothing changed. Final of Gimel, Koyin Shenosan get Liyevimtoi Hakoyhenes. Now, if you remember from Elchas Libum, that really only Chalitza is what severs the bond. But the get, Midrabanan, will not allow marriage, Yibum. So he gave a get, Yavaldik. And now, just to know, the woman will not be allowed to do Yibum Yaakov, not only with this man, this brother. Midrabanan, since one brother gave her a get, she cannot do Yibum with anyone. Shadei Nesra Olav. But Va'adayin Zikasa Aleha, because you gotta get, you have to do Chalitza. Now, Harezu Eicheles Bitruma. We're going back to the case we had before. She is a Bas Kohen. She's a Kohenes. What was the issue? The issue is that if she were now to marry any of them, right, it will be a marriage that's pasal midrabanan. We don't say it's a problem because sharehi mishameres only lebi absul shalivreim. She'ena get place leivam elamedevreim. So if one of the brothers is a chalol, then we say she's connected to someone whom midoiraisa she cannot marry. Here, taka midrabanan, she may not marry any of them. She needs chalitza, so there is a zika, but only to absul midrabanan. V'chein kohenes chalutza. Or she's a shniya. Shenes arsa lekoyin. Here again, what did we learn before in halacha chaf aleph that your meshamres lebi psula? Yeah, that problem is only if it's a bi psula min hatoira. Here it's a bi psula min rabbanan. So therefore, oicheles, guys, because she's a kohenes. Don't forget, doesn't passel her. And final adin, kohen hedyet that marries an islandess. And you should know that there's a machlekas tanoim if you remember. People in Yavamas not that long ago, Shittas Rabbi Yehuda holds that since you can't have children with her. That Rabbi Yehuda holds that marriage is asur. That any marriage that's asur, the steps, it renders her a zoina and then it renders her into a halala. But we don't paskin like Rabbi Yehuda. So okay, so Atkan, the rules of kinyan kaspai of a kohen, how the kohen can be ma'achol. And then we learned how if you are a bas kohen, you're a kohenes, and some marriages that are asur will passel you to eat. This chapter is going to speak about the cases where poislin v'loy machilin, only the negative. Poislin v'loy machilin, we'll see the ubar, the yavam engagement, and then there'll be certain connections. Loy poislin v'loy machilin. That's going to be the Pedic Ches. Pedic Ches has 16 halachas. So let's go into the first category. Ha'ubar. The Rambam is going to explain every single one. Yavam. We mentioned a little bit of Ibum. We're going to come back to it. Eirusin. And a cheresh, or this is the same one. Ubem teisha shanim b'yoyim echad. That in certain scenarios they only have the ability to passel if their connection is to a bas kohen. On the other hand, if they are the kohen and she's the bas Yisrael, it's like it's a negative. It's a double negative. They can only passel v'loy machilin. It's like Chazal say in other places, certain people pigi yasam ra. There's no upside. There's no upside with this bond vis-a-vis the laws of someone being allowed, or for one to be able to continue to be allowed to eat truma. Let's go. What do we mean? Simple. Ha'uber ketzer. Bas Yisrael, who gets married to a kohen. We learned this yesterday. If she has children from the kohen, even if her husband passes away, she will always be allowed to eat truma. What happens if she married a kohen? The kohen now passed away. She's pregnant from the kohen. The ubar is not a metzias enough to allow her to eat truma. Hamuberes mi kohen. Right, the husband died. Obviously, if she's married, she can eat because of her husband. But now she wants to eat because of her child. That's called loy machilin. Now let's go.
What? Maybe.
No issue.
Miscarried?
No. The Torah is right. There's only zera. I think that Rambam quotes the pasuk. We quote a pasuk.
If he's alive, then she could for sure eat because she's his wife.
Yes, Danny, you wake up, drink a coffee. We just said it. Now, Ubas Kohen.
Even though she's pregnant, once the baby's born.
Only when the baby is born. Oh, Uber cannot be Michael. Now, what's the poislim? If she's a Bas Kohen. Now, same thing, guys. You have to go back to what we learned yesterday. A Bas Kohen who's married to a Yisrael, actually a Bas Kohen who's engaged to a Yisrael, can no longer eat. Okay. Now, what happens if the husband passes away? Then she goes back to her parents' home. If she has a child, what did we learn yesterday? She can no longer go back. What happens if when the husband dies, she's pregnant? It's not consistent. You're pregnant? You can't eat Truma. In other words, an Ubar is not a child enough to be Michael. But an Ubar is enough of a child to passel her. Ubas Kohen, let's be Yisrael. Guys, you have to add Danny the words. And the husband dies. Asura lechoil mipnei Ubar. And why is that? Because it says that when can a Bas Kohen go back to eat Truma once the marriage got dissolved? Only when she can return to her father's home as she was when she was a maiden. Prat lemo beres. Halacha gim. Bas Kohen shema Allah Yisrael. She's a Bas Kohen. If she has a relation with the Yisrael, that means guys l'shem zunus. What will be the din? She's not married. Another din, even though we just said that a Bas Kohen that's even only pregnant from a Yisrael cannot eat Truma. Does halacha say she's pregnant? So there's klal, and we have this in the Gemara, that a woman who has a relation, l'shem zinus, will, halacha says, will do certain things to minimize the chances of her getting pregnant. So therefore, we can presume she's not pregnant, even though an uber is pasels. That's important. Ella, now we also learned in the last chapter, the act of bia itself makes a woman tamei. And then we learned that if she was nishapcha during Tashmish, the 3 days, say that all these didn't apply. Now, guys, let's go to a Bas Kohen that was married to a Yisrael. When you're married, you don't take these precautions to prevent yourself from getting pregnant. And her husband dies. She doesn't know she's pregnant, but why don't we say in halacha after she's pregnant? And we just said in halacha beis that an uber passes. Only up till 40 days. Here you have one of the few areas in halacha that even if a woman is pregnant, halachically until 40 days, va'ad b'chlal maya ba'alma. That uber does not pass her. The im hukar ubara. Now, hukar ubara normally takes more than 40 days. Right? The Chumash says about Tamar, 3 months. Now, here's the problem. If she discovers later she's pregnant, this is before you have today pregnancy text, and she was eating truma, so there's a din that if a person eats truma, bishoygeg, they have to compensate the owner the money and a chaimish and a chanami. Lemafreya is not until when she got pregnant, only back until the 41st day, Adar Boim Yoim, because and she has to pay back the money and a chaimish from, let's say, her father. But Shekol Boim Eno Ubar. So when the Rambam says Ubar pasels, just to make it clear, it's from the 41st day of conception. Next, halacha dalid, Bas Yisrael shenisas lekoyin. It's late. She marries a koyin. All right, she's allowed to eat. Umeis, and he leaves her pregnant. And guys, there are no other kids, as we just learned above. An uber cannot be Michael until when the baby is born. She can't eat, and therefore her avodim cannot eat. Now there's another question. You know what the question is, Danny? If we say that the yesh kinyan leubar, then we would say that the evet can eat because it belongs to the uber. But we don't say that. Even the avodim cannot eat bishvil ha'ubar. Shahayaloid husha Michael. Because there is a kinyan, even though he's only 1 day old, since he's a kohen, his avodim can eat. But ve'ena yalod ena machal ein kinyan leuber. And I want you to know that ein kinyan leuber when it comes to Yerusha, when someone gives a gift to the uber, since there is a concept of das acheres maknoloi, an uber, according to the Rambam, could acquire. Remember that. Don't think here it's speaking about Yerusha. Now lefikach means since we are paskening that there's no kinyan to an ubar. That's this lefikach. Im hoya ha'uber chalal lamal yusa. What did we learn in the last chapter? If you have two shutfim, so let's say there are brothers. If an Uber would have acquired Yerusha, even though there's another brother, if he is a chalal, dafka this guy, then the avodim cannot eat because they're partially owned by a chalal. Here it won't bother us. Because he doesn't own them. He's only owned in the case where there are other brothers. But once he's born, boomba, then he becomes a partner over here. And we learned in the last chapter that two partners that are both kohanim, if one of them is pasul, is a chalal, then he passes his chelik in the ownership, passes the other to eat. The also avodim elechol. Atkan ubar. Let's go now. You get the concept of poislim v'leimachilim. Let's go now to a yavam. Hayavam ketzad. So let's go like this. You have a bas Yisrael. She was married to a kohen. When she was married, she was eating. She was married to a kohen. She had no kids. That's why she's a shemeres yavam. The husband passes away. The kohen, the husband, left brothers. She's kukali yavam kohen. We don't say, "Ooh, you're connected." Zika. It's not enough. Lo yisoichal. Because it says the kohen to ikna nefesh, the zadayin loy kana oisa. The Gemara uses the words. I don't know how you lost the connection over here. That kinyan the achifu. Interesting verse. Now, ubas kohen has a kukali Yisrael. Let's go on the opposite. She's a bas kohen chavra halkab. When she was married to her husband, she was not allowed to eat. When the husband passes away, if there are no children, we learned yesterday she could eat. Here, there's a brother. That does not allow her to eat. In other words, yibum pasel, sir. Again, when is she allowed to go back to her father's home, the shovel beisavil? We don't even need the words kin norel. That was the prat milberes. Prat l'shemeres yavam. Vaiter Allah chavav. Yavam koin shaba al yivimtoi. Yivimtoi is bas Yisrael. Now you consummated the marriage, right? But if the marriage was ba'oines or it was bishgaga, oy she had a babaloi gamar. Even though we learned in Hilchas Yibum, that is bia enough to consummate their marriage. Look how great this halacha is. When it comes to this din, eino machila betruma, ache yivel beila gemura biratzain. Wow! But bamed varam amurim, if she fell to Yibum because her connection to the living brothers then was only through Eidosim, bishenes almana mino Eidosim. But if she was married to the original brother, which means she was already eating, so now toichel the biazu, even though it's called a bia gerua. Halacha zayin. Next case of poislin u'lemachila, Eidosim, engagement. Bas Yisrael, Bas Kohen, that gets engaged to a Yisrael. That's it. Asur lechol, because that's kinyan. And like we said in the beginning, we said yesterday, guys, really midin Torah, a Bas Yisrael that becomes engaged to a Kohen should be allowed to eat truma. The kinyan is there. It's only midrabanan. Bas Yisrael shenash lekohen lo yisoichel at shedikonis lechupa. Either is a kinyan, yeah, but midrabanan she can eat. Shema tachel b'nei avia. K'may shebeyan, as we learned yesterday in Peirik Vav. Halacha ches. Yisrael she'amar lekohenes. Yisrael that tells her kohenes. That means their engagement will disallow her from eating. After 30 days. Okay, but if he tells her that means after 30 days, the kedushin is going to be chalam afreya. If you make a tanai, if it's in that, which means that even if the tanai will happen, it's only from then on. Okay, then she can eat it until when the tanai is going to be required. But if he uses the words almanas, v'chulei, halachatas. Next, chedesh. Chedesh says that Rambam, kohenes that marries a chedesh Yisrael, we say that even though midda oiraisa a chedesh cannot affect a kinyan, midda oiraisa, midrabanan he could, midrabanan there is a marriage, paiselas, he's paisel, lo yisaychal. Even though she's a kohenes, but in the other direction, if she's a bas Yisrael and she gets marriage l'kohen chedesh, Loi soichal. Why she's married to a kohen? Nah, that's only midrabanan. She'enu kohen min ha'Torah because she'enu min das. Next, nis arsa lekohen pikeach. No, it's when he gave her kedushin, he was a pikeach. Midoi raisa, guys. Midoi raisa. Erusin is enough for him to be Michael. We just learned this in Allah Chazayin, and we learned this in Perek Vav. It's only midrabanan she can eat. However, v'loi hispik lekansa to the chuppah achin is chadish, and then they get married. So you would think, at least now, let her eat. Still, Dani Mormachman Eno Echalas. No, it's Arusa Eno Echalas. Nesuye Cheresh, we said it's only midrabanan. She can't eat. Mace, but if this man dies, and V'naflus Yavam Cheresh, V'yibma. The Yibma means, we're going back to the case before where there was a marriage. There was a marriage, and then he dies. Also, Eno Echalas. Big chiddush. The bia of the brother is kind of midoi raisa. It's not better than what we learned in Allah Vav. It's not better than this bia b'shoigeg. Here's different. If the marriage was a bona fide marriage, and only later he became an Chadish. First of all, she continues to eat because she's kinyan kasvay of the kohen. And if the husband dies, v'naflu yavam cheiresh, and he does yibum. This kinyan is doiraisa. Why? Because it's not a good bia. It's a bia gerua. But at least she's coming from a marriage that there was a time that she was allowed to eat. Next day in ve'esha is chedesh. Even though the marriage is only midrabanan, but now she has a son with a kohen, a son that's a kohen, or actually it's even a daughter, like we learned yesterday. Now she gets to eat, not because of her husband. She gets to eat because of her descendants. Halacha Yudal. This is the final case now of Poislin v'loy machilin. Ben tesha shana v'yim echad ketzad. Poislin v'loy machilin. He says, Mishen v'ala. If you're halting cup over here, we're speaking about a bas kohen. Bas kohen gets to eat until she marries a kohen. If she has a bia with a 9-year-old, Mishen v'ala lo asrullah. So first of all, obviously it has to be someone who asers with the bia, which means it's going to render her into a halala. Now, this guy can be a... That's it. So if it's being because she becomes a zoina or a halala, as we learned in Luchas Suribiyah. Furthermore, just to note this then, even if the man is impotent, without getting into the mechanics, I don't know how if a guy is impotent, he can't have a kishoy. If his avid went into her, that's the shachov. It's called a bia. He's not even an adult. He's 9 years old in one day.
Status of the 9-year-old. He's a what?
He's a mamzer. He's a mashal.
Oh, that's okay.
All of the men, there are certain men that whoever they have a relation with, it passes them from me. Now, Ubas Yisrael, let's go in the other direction. No, we began with a bas kohen, so it passes. She's a bas Yisrael. Even if she got married to a kohen, a kosher kohen, he's 9 years old in one day. He cannot be Michael. You get it? Understand? Because it's not a real kinyan. Now, what happens if you have a suffix? Guys, here the suffix is that this man, Danny, let's say he's a suffix mamzer. We'll use that as an example. We have a suffix, shahu, he's a suffix mamzer, but he's for sure 9 years old in one day. Or, one second, suffix she'enoi, meaning he's not a mamzer, we don't know.
How old he is?
No, suffix, if he's a mamzer, if he passes her, Nisos, Leben, Sholish, Esri, Shona v'yemechad. Suffix shevishtei sara, suffix lehevi. Or, the opposite direction, Danny, if you're speaking about a bas Yisrael that's marrying a kohen. She can only eat, we said, if she marries a real marriage. A cotton cannot affect a real kinyan. We have a doubt whether this kohen is 13 in one day. In other words, we always will say to go on the tzad chamor. Hareizu asuram lechol halacha yud beis kol elu she'ein machilim letruma shel Torah. Even though we learned in the last chapter this huge difference between tumah deraisa and tumah derabanan, when it comes to these dinim, no difference. Kach ein machilim letruma shel devreim. We don't differentiate here. Zera shema yachilu b'shel Torah. Unlike, again, the big thing that we learned today in the first chapter. Saying big because some people, until learning the Rambam, we don't have most of Talmud Bavli is not on Taras, which people don't know about. Okay, going back.
Saying that if she has a relation with someone that is possible to her, she's now done forever.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, right. Halacha Yud Gimel. It's a kohenes that becomes a zoino or a halal cannot eat. Correct. And it takes just one beer to do that. Halacha Yud Gimel. Now we're going to go into the next topic of today's chapter. Loi poislin v'loi machilin. Just remember, whenever you're speaking about poislin, you're speaking about a bas kohen, right? That's eating trumas beis aviyah. Certain relations will not passel, consistent. Or if it's a bas yisrael that marries a kohen, that will loy machilin. What will that be? What type of connection? The oinus. We're going to speak out each one. The mafata, both ways. Hashoita shenasa isha. Ela imkein hoisa asura lohem. Shein poislenesem bebiyasan. No, we're not speaking about a relation that you don't need marriage for. Like if a mamzer has a relation with a bas kohen, that's it. She becomes puzzle forever. So let's give examples. Misha nisas lekohen shoita. Pashat. She's a bas Yisrael. She marries a kohen shoita. Oy sha'anas oisa. This kohen raped her, or this kohen seduced her. And we just said in Halacha Yud Gimel, these are the cases where she can't eat because of it, but that's all to be allowed to eat mitzat kinyan kaspai. But what we learned yesterday was there's another din, that if you have a child with a kohen, you get to eat because of your child. In all of these cases, yes. What's the suffix? Not the din. If you know for sure that your child is from the kohen, you eat truma. The Rambam is bringing up a technical thing. You're not married. So when you're married, we say, here we're speaking about a woman, she got pregnant. Maybe she got pregnant from someone else. That's the suffix. No, how do you know that the father is a kohen? Still, provided that she's not known to be promiscuous. But if there's only a halachic rumor that she's promiscuous, then we're not going to say that she can eat truma, because we just finished saying that normally when you have a suffix is not enough to be Michael. Let's go back to halacha Yud Gimel, right? So what are we saying? That if not a Yisrael that passes her, but there's no marriage there. Shoita Yisrael. Or if God forbid he was ma'anaser, mafater, and v'nesabra. So what did we begin learning today? That an uber, the beginning of this chapter, is enough to passel her. Uber is poislin, not Michael. Here again, what's the chiddush? Maybe the pregnancy is not from this guy. She's not married to him. We don't say that. We say this from him.
So just to go back to that first case, if the kohen raped her, she bore a child from him, but they're not married,
then she can eat. That we're learning. Yes. And here also, unless she's known to be promiscuous, we presume, even out of marriage, that is the father, and therefore, the father is a Yisrael. However, if God forbid, nischate means she made an abortion because she got raped. So then, halacha tezvav. Eishes ish, we're speaking about the Abbas Yisrael. No, she was only allowed to eat because she's married to a kohen. Now she's a soita. Because until she drinks the me'amarim, she's suffix zoinam. That's why they're married. They're king and kaspe, but she's a suffix zoinam. Suffix, we said, we're machmer. Makes by lekodim sheyashkenam. Oishoisim in anoshim. We had 15 women. We had a nirchasoita. Loy noitles, loy noitles ksubasam. Well, hadei zosura b'truma loylam. B'chol eishes koyin. That says temeya ani. Even though, as we learned, when a woman says temeya ani, she's not nemenes. Shema nosna inel ba'acher. But when it comes to this din of eating truma, if she says temeya ani, hadei zosura b'lachol b'truma. She's saying I'm a zoino. Halachic Zayin. Okay, final halacha to Zayin. Ketana Bas Yisrael, Shenis is Lekoyim. Now, guys, halt up. A Ketana Bas Yisrael, that's the father was Makabel Kedushin, it's Kedushay de Oiraisa. When the father brought her into the chuppah, Midas Aviyah, she's Nusues, Midoiraisa. She gets to eat Truma. Here, even if her father got Kedushin, what happens if she got married without her father's consent? That marriage is not valid only if the father later authenticates it. If the father says, I did not allow them to get married, I did not consent, then there'll be no Nasuyin. Ketana by Yisrael shenis lekoyin shlonas aviyah, bein bifnei aviyah, bein shalei b'fanav. The chiddush is that you can argue that if she got married bifnei aviyah, isn't silence consent? Lav dafka here. Afal pisha kitch aviyah. But we learned today, again, and as we learned yesterday, that midrabanan, kiddushin is not enough for you to eat it. Why? Because even now, it was done in front of him and he was silent. This silence is not consent. Could be that he's angry. It's because he has the good chinuch of when you're angry, be quiet. And since there's a possibility for this marriage to be retroactively nullified, she cannot eat truma. Today's final chapter, Pedig Tes.
And is there when he marries her, and we say it's still.
That's right. Pedig Tes is now going to speak about the Bas Yisrael that marries a Kohen, and she's eating because she's married the Eved that belongs to the Kohen, King and Kaspai. All right, if he's giving her a divorce, we're going to get into some technicalities exactly until when could she eat and from what point may she not eat. And we're going to have other dinim of king and kasva, even animals. Do you know that truma of Michael behema can be given to a behema that belongs to a kohen? Well, what's going to happen if the kohen gives his behema to a Yisrael to guard? In other words, we're going to learn about dinim of kinyanim in the context of, are you kinyan kaspa of the kohen? And therefore, the animal can eat truma or not. Pedig Tes has 10 halachas, beginning with halacha al. For Isha, oichelas betruma, Bas Yisrael, married to a kohen, ad sheyagia get liyodam. Was even if they're separated in America. No, she can eat truma. She's married. Until when either the reaches her end, or the get goes into her shliach like Kabbalah, and b'chol shehi safek gerusha, halachically, as we learned in the last chapter, safek she can no longer eat. Now, and the shliach is not in her presence, so we say asura lechol b'truma miyad. First of all, there are chazaka that a shliach oisa shlichusa. Number two, we're obviously, guys, we're speaking about a scenario where there's even the most minute possibility that the shliach like Kabbalah got to get. You don't see the shliach. He's going to do a shlichus. Maybe it happened. That's enough of a suffix for you not to be allowed to eat truma. Now, but if she tells a shliach like Kabbalah, Kabbalah giti b'makom ploni, I want you to get my get in that location. Well, if she's in LA, I want you to get my get in New York. So if that's the case, you go the minimum amount of time that it takes to get to that location. During that time, she can have the truma. We learned that there is a third type of shlichus, the shliach of the Baal Lahilacha. There's a shliach from the woman like Kabbalah, and we also learned shliach hoiva'ah that she sends. She sends a shliach to pick up her get and bring it back to her. In that case, she's only migorashes when the get comes back into her hand. So sholcha shliach lahavaz gita, she's allowed to eat the truma she get liyado. Next thing, because he doesn't want her to fall to yibum. For example, no one knows when they're going to die, so asura lechol b'truma miyad. Halacha beis. If a city is under siege, we're speaking always about a Bas Yisrael that's married to a kohen. He's Michael to her. She has no children that are alive. So when do we say, oh, maybe he's dead? And we don't forget, when there's a suffix, she can't eat. So if it's only just surrounded with the enemies, or if you have, he's in a ship, we know that there's a danger for it sinking. We don't know more than that. Or if someone is suspect in America, he's being judged for a capital sin, but the trial is still going on. All of these cases, the chazaka is they're still alive. Whenever you go on a trip, you can argue maybe you died on the trip because it's dangerous. We don't say that. it's not enough of a suffix to passel her to eating truma. But if the husband is in a city that's not surrounded by enemy troops, but shekevashu akarkoim, they already invaded the city. You're living in Ukraine, svina she'avda bayam, or if someone is already going out, here there's a much bigger chashash that it already happened. Or mi shegiraratu chaya, no one saw him dying, but you saw a wild animal dragging him away. Someone who is known to be under a collapsed building, God forbid. Someone who is known to be swept away by a nod. So even though, again, many other dinim, we don't say that she's a bona fide almana. But here, which will include lefikach im hayinishusayim bas koyin liYisrael, which means in the case where she has no kids, that when you know he died, she can go back to eat truma. We say no, maybe he didn't die. But if she's a bas Yisrael koyin, maybe he's still alive. Maybe he's dead here. In a Yiddish beis, and he's taken out lehareg. Here, and the chiddush here is it's not l'chumra. She can't eat. Same thing is with goyim. No, but not on the other way around. So if the husband is a Yisrael and she's a bas koyin, she has no kids. She's not even no beres. Here, the Rambam means to say that once the husband was being let out to be put to death, becheskas that he was killed. Yes, halacha gimel.
So the Jewish court is more reliant that they're going to kill the guy rather than a non-Jewish
yes,
court?
because once, as we learned, because we're not allowed to be ma'ana the din, even though there's a possibility that he says that I have a new taina for me and with the flags, but it's very rare. Once he's going out, there's no going back. Let's go back to halacha gimel. A woman left her husband in the process of death. That's a wife. She left him. A ben shoyso kehenes, etchis Yisrael. Oh, Yisrael zesh koyim. Lo yisroichal. Why? Sheroiv goysesim lemisa. But in 1 second, you always machmer, not the other way around, because a miyut goysesim live, and that's a miyut enough that if she's a kohenes eshes Yisrael, chayshina lemiyut. Echad oimer meis baila, echad oimer meis. They cancel each other out. I'm sorry again. They don't cancel each other out in both directions. In both directions. What the five women that hate each other? And the stepdaughter bas bailam. So since we don't believe them, even Lakula. If it's a Bas Yisrael that married a Kohen, that the husband is alive, even though they're saying he died. Now the same thing with a get shichrur. Now guys, when a person owns a Evet Kanani, there is the freedom medine mamanis, but after that he has to give the Evet a document, and until the Evet getting the document, he's not meshuchran. So here also, from when can this Evet no longer eat truma? Only mishayiska beget shichrur. There has to be that legal document. Then pesalim elachol betruma. But even though he's free, but v'dayin u'ukav shichrur, as we will learn more of zavadim. Afal pikein. Oh, 1 second. Oh, but if freedom was given. If freedom was given, even though he did not get shichrur, now many times it comes together. We're machmer. If he's free to work, then also haneu asim alachal betruma. Halacha vav. Hakoisev nachasav la'acher. Guys, general dinim. Now, if the new owner is a kohen, that owner will be meichel the avodim to eat truma. If the new owner acquired an evet, nothing to talk about. What happens if someone, without the knowledge, without being appointed as a shliach on behalf of this kohen, was zoicha, made a king in the nachasim for someone else? And there is a general rule that mizaken la'adam shalei b'fanav. So here we go. Not only did he write a document that someone made a king in, and the acher now, you have the right, you can say, I don't want the responsibility. When you found out that someone was mezaka, everything, including avodim, that person first was silent. The shasak ze shunasnu loi, when he heard about it, he was silent. And then he said, I don't want any of that. The guys, make no mistake. If the guy says, I'm mafkid, then there's nothing what to talk about. He didn't shout, hefkid. He shouted, I never agreed to acquire it. So now there's a suffix in the Torah, and halacha, there is a suffix, im zeh shetzavach, is viewed not at first he was makabel it, and now he's trying to undo it, and you can't undo it by shouting you never agreed. Do we say, the other option is no, that the shouting now is araya, you never agreed. And therefore, v'adayin leyotzem reshus rishayin. Well, let's go in a case where the reshus rishayin was a claim, and the reshus sheni is a yisrael. And once the get shichrut goes into effect, then this guy cannot eat truma. Here we have a doubt. So we have a doubt, and therefore, no matter in what direction, whether Rabbi Rishon or maybe the Rabbi Sheni are kohanim, this evet can never eat truma. All of these cases where there's a doubt, no more truma. Because maybe the second guy was zoichem. It's not hoicheach soifay al tchilasei. If Hasheni Yisrael, maybe Rabbi Rishon was a Yisrael Hasheni kohen. So we say that this guy, maybe yes, hoicheach soifay al tchilas. New topic. Halacha zayin. Yisrael shesachar behema mi kohen. How do you use chirus? Right, for bedikas chametz, the chi was on the soiche. Not over here. If a Yisrael sachar behema mi kohen, we say that even though you are renting the animal, who does the goof of the animal belong to? To the kohen. Therefore, ma'achila betruma. In other words, chirus is not a kinyan for these dinim. It's kinyan chaspoi of the kohen. Let's go in the other direction. A kohen shesachar behemas Yisrael. It's consistent. It's not a chumrah. It's consistent. Even though currently now the renter is chayv mezayna yisrael, lo yachileno truma. B'pnei she'ena kinyan chaspoi. Next thing, halacha ches. Yisrael shesham para mikoyin lefatma. So there was a common practice of business is that someone owns an animal. Another would come along, would take that animal. They would evaluate the animal. How much is it worth now? Now it's worth $1,000. I'm going to feed the animal for the next 2 months. I'm going to make the animal fat. The animal is going to increase in another $1,000. And I will be a shutet in that part. Oh, so the part belongs to a client. The Yisrael now is going to become a partner.
He's just paying for a service.
The way we want to know, we learned in 2 chapters ago, Perek Zayin, 2 shutfim that own something. If one shutf cannot be meicheli pasul. So let's go. So he's considered an owner in the shvach. Lo yoichal truma. Af al pi sheyesh lekoyin chelik b'shvacha. But the Yisrael also has a chelik b'shvacha. It's called, he has a chelik in that additional fact. Avol koyin. It's going the other way around. Shesham para mi Yisrael lefatma. Now, Danny, look at this. Af al pi sheyesh li Yisrael chelik b'shevach. Hoyel v'gufa lakoyin. Here we say that the body belongs to the mafatim. Here we say the body belongs to the mafatim. Why does it belong to the mafatim? Because now we add the chiyuv and achrayis. No, a seicher is also chayv and achrayis. But the fact that he has a chelik in the added fats, and he's chayiv in the achrayis of the whole animal. Now we say you're only chayv and achrayis, but you have no chelik in the guf. Because you need to have both svaras. It works, not partnership. We say 2 things. Chiyuv and achrayis is something regarding ownership. Let's go to Hilchas Pesach, right? If you go to a hotel on Pesach and you have in the frigo bar, you have alcohol, you're chayiv bal yirah b'yimotz. You didn't take it out. Chayiv achrayis. Chiyuv achrayis is considered ownership in many dinim in the Torah. Here it's not enough. But here you have 2 things. Number 1, the current guy is chayiv achrayis. Now I know by a seicher also. But by a soicher, he has no king in beguf. Here, the fact that I'm being mefatim it, which gives me a chelik, and I'm chai bachrais, makes the current guy consider the owner. Okay, that's the halacha. Halacha tes. Parasai shall Yisrael sheyol the bechar. Now think about it. The owner has the toivas hana to choose who to give it to, but this bechar belongs to a kohen. Machilai truma gevaldig shabachar lekayhanim. Now, how will a Yisrael have truma? You know what? You can buy truma for cheap. You have to pay for it. You can own truma. You can give it to the behema. Now that there are times that I can feed, I'm allowed as a Yisrael to store vetch or other types of Michael behemoths in my shoivech to give it to animals that I will have to give to a kohen, or to give it to any animals that belong to kohanim. The chiddush is final halacha yud yeroli of the Rambam says she'im machar hakoyin peiros Yisrael. Let's go. So some hilchas kinyanim. What is koyin? That's Rabbi Zajac and Shlakish. Don't know how we paskin. And we'll see how the Rambam paskins. So if a koyin sold this cow to Yisrael, money was exchanged. There was a kinyan kesef, but there wasn't mishich. Now, being that midrabanan, right? Remember the gzeira shema yominu yisfu chitecha b'aliyah. So Mashiach has to happen, but the midin Torah, the kesef was koyin, which means midin Torah, who owns it? The Yisrael. Oh, hadei also l'chila truma, because the din Torah mo is koyin, as we will learn even though midrabanan you got to do Mashiach, but that kinyan disconnected the potter from the koyin. It's not kinyan kasp. Now let's go. The imachar Yisrael likoyin. Even though shenasan hadamim, this is a very important rule. Shenasan hadamim, it's now it has to be the koyens. Because that's the power of the chachamim. Once the chachamim made a takana that you're not koyin until when you make mashicha, you're not koyin until you make mashicha. Wow.